Hi everybody, it's Michelle here at Solo in Canada, and I'm here to talk to you today about identity, which is a very big topic with many different sub chapters within it, because identity is a combination of many different factors. You attain your identity from many sources. One could be the group that you're categorized to belong to. So your family group or a race group or a gender group. And then identity is also achieved through your career and the industry that you work from. So people identify as I'm a teacher, I'm a doctor, I'm a veterinarian, I'm a carpenter. So there's also that. And then your identity can be formed by the politics that you tend to align yourself with. And we've certainly seen that in the last 5 to 10 years, how much our society in Canada influenced from the United States, where people are getting involved in identity politics. And then identity can get influenced by your values. And then finally, your identity can be created by your role in your family. So for women, if they decide to have children, they are in the midst of raising children, they will identify themselves as the mother of 3 young boys or whatever. So there's that, and then finally there's the identity of how you choose to spend your time, the activities that you feel you make a priority, and the people that you choose to have close to you in your life and that you spend the most number of hours with. So you can see that identity is complicated, and particularly right around the ages of 40s or 50s, there is a bit of a questioning of your identity. And at that time, after having spent, your 20s just kind of running after a goal and comparing yourself to your peers, you then often find something that you become immersed in for your 30s. So in your 30s, it's work, 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 and achieve. And also, if you're involved in raising a family, you are completely, your life is completely taken over with family responsibilities. And at that point, you might be identifying as a husband, a wife, a mother, uh, uh, babysitter, whatever. I'm sorry, I can't think of more examples, but when you get to your 40s, depending on if you have children, how old they are, if they are starting to get into their teen years and you are starting to find that you have a little bit of breathing space and you are starting to be able to have a little bit more time to devote to yourself, you might at that point find out that you don't know what you want to spend that extra time with, because you don't actually know much about you yourself outside of those other identities that you put upon yourself, as in terms of your role in the family or your purpose in those decades leading before now. And then in your 50s, you get a little bit of influence from your age in comparison to average lifespan. And at that point, you start to be able to, just way off on the distance, you can start to see that there's an end to this life. And at that point, you can start to feel like you're measuring how much you've achieved in your first 50 years and thinking, well, gee, if I only have 30 or 40 years left, am I going to make it to the finish line having achieved all that I wanted to achieve? And at that point, you might start to assess what your true goals are moving forward. And you might want to make some adjustments there. So you can see that we get to the ages of 40s, 50s, and there's reasons why you're starting to question your identity and look a little closer at it. And another time that identity becomes a bit of a discussion is in your 60s, and that often might revolve around the age of retirement. And so you have been identifying for years in whatever role that you have in work, and all of a sudden you're talking about leaving work, which means you're going to walk away from that entire aspect of your identity. And now it's like a big question mark. Now what? Now am I? Now what is my purpose? What do I value besides the values that I had as potentially a parent raising children, or the values and the way I wanted to raise them, and then the values that you had in your role in the workplace? If those two things are gone, or at least have played, I mean, you're always going to be a parent if you're a parent, but your parenting becomes very different when your children are adults. All of a sudden it's like, well, what am I supposed to attach my purpose to? And before you can decide what you want to attach your purpose to, you have to know what you value. And so it requires a certain amount of introspection. And so I'm going to talk to you today about those things and some of the ways that people have found to explore who they are inside. And so I kind of look at it like there's two different ways to explore what you find important, and also what types of activities you'd like to get involved in that will align with what you believe to be important. And the first category would be activities that you could do that would be of an external nature, in the sense that you're trying to seek answers for yourself and get some clarity from a more academic or intellectual perspective. You're trying to find the answers to your questions about these things externally by doing an academic exploration, you being the topic. And so that's where you're doing a lot of reading, and you might be listening to YouTube videos, and you might be getting answers from people that are close to you. You might be talking about that. You might also be doing those little quizzes that you can do online, where you fill out your, how you spend all of your time, and then you can also make a list of the things that you say you value in your life, and then you can compare whether or not those things you said you valued are actually even on the chart of how you spend most of your time. And I've done that extra exercise a couple of times in my adult life, and they're kind of fun because it is a little bit of a surprise when you fill that out. The first section, where you're deciding how much you allot time to in your weekly movements, it's a pie graph, and you kind of allot sections based on percentages of your time, your whole time in the week. What percentage of the time were you, say, doing things to earn money, and what percentage of the time were you spending time with family, and what percentage of the time were you doing home maintenance and chores, and like just keeping your home setting to the way that you would like it to be. All of those sections in the pie graph you fill out. And then the second part of that quiz is a checklist where you're going to prioritize. You're going to list your top 5 to 7 values that you think that you live by, and you're going to number them in order. And then the third part of the exercise is to then take that checklist and go back and see how compatible it is with the pie chart you created. And if it's very different, then that means that you might want to rethink how you are mapping out your week and how much time you're dedicating to all these different sections of your life. I hope you can't hear that motor in the background. I can't tell if it's a seaplane or a boat, but hopefully it will pass, and I will do my best to try and get that noise out of the recording. If taking that little quiz type exercise appeals to you, and you think you would like to see yourself how your values align with how you allot your time, I'll put a I'll put that little exercise into a link in the description down below, and you can print that off. And or if you don't have a printer, then just look at what it's 2 pages. Look at how the pages are designed. You can just get a scrap piece of paper and you can do it yourself without printing, and you can test it out, and it is completely free. So don't be shy, go ahead and check it out and do the exercise. I'd love to hear how it works for you. So if you do the exercise and you have some comments to share on that, please do so in the comments. And so if you do that exercise and you find out that your values are pretty aligned with how you spend your week, lucky you, that's awesome. And you probably don't feel the same amount of angst as other people. But in the 2 times that I did it, I remember deciding that I was not allotting my time properly because the things I said I valued and the things that I was spending my time on, they weren't aligned at all. And that meant that I was going to have to create an action plan, and I was going to have to come up with changes that I could make that were manageable and realistic. These small changes that I could make so that I could ensure that at the end of a full week that I could look back and see that if I said I valued family, that over the week that I had actually carved out time in my busy week to make sure that I was there for family. And all of those exercises are really quite helpful. I know there are other ones out there on the internet, so perhaps that's something that you might want to do if that sounds of interest and you think you could benefit from that. And then the second way that we can try to explore who we are is internally. So that's when you're going to get more involved with some meditative type thinking where you are blocking out all of the noise from the external environment. You're finding a quiet place to be where you can just be alone and settle with your thoughts. What I like to do is get out in nature for that. I need to be away from people, and I need to be just close to nature and have no rush on my time. So I'll go out there when I have a lot of time and nobody's expecting me. I have no responsibilities that day, so my mind isn't distracted. And I just spend hours out there thinking deeply. And when you are thinking deeply, I can just hear somebody saying, "But what am I thinking about?" So what you're thinking about is sort of, it's almost like going down memory lane. You're thinking over all your years. Try to go back to a time when things were less crazy and you were young and you had your whole life ahead of you. So maybe in your late teens or early 20s. And what were the things that you dreamed of? What did you envision for yourself in your life? What is it that you expected that you would end up having a life like? And what were your passions? What were the things that got you really excited to get up in the morning? And think back to your best days in your life. And what were you doing on those days? What were the feelings that you were having that make you recall them as your best days ever? And how could you get a little bit of that back? And one of the things that I thought of was when I was kind of thinking about this filming was that, when we were kids, we did a lot of lying on the grass or the dock and just looking at the clouds float by for a long time. Or I remember being in a meadow where there was sort of tall plantings. And so when you actually lie right down on the ground, you're a little lower than the plants, and that blocks out the noise. Or in the winter when you build snow forts and then you lie down on the ground and the snow is muffling all of the sound, and it's actually keeping you warm too because there's no wind coming when you're down below the edges of the snow fort. And it feels like you're in the cone of silence to some degree. Do you remember the cone of silence from Get Smart? And you're just thinking about all the possibilities with no concerns that you actually aren't going to achieve them. And now here you are all these years later, and I know some of you are thinking it's too late. But you know what? It's never too late. It is absolutely never too late. Even if some of the things you decide you'll go after, you're not sure you can achieve in the time that you have left, that's not important. The importance is that as you figure out what it is that you really wanted to do, and then you actually are taking action to do that, you are creating that identity for yourself. Even the smallest step in that direction is a step towards securing that identity for yourself. It doesn't really matter in the end what you achieved. It was, as they say, it was the climb that made all the difference. And so, I mean, for me personally, I have two parents who are writers, and they both went to university and my mother got a journalism degree, and my father got a degree in radio and TV. And then he became a college professor years later in screenplay writing. And I always wondered why I couldn't write, because it just didn't seem to be, something that I was compelled to do. I always thought that was a little odd that I didn't seem to have any of both parents. You'd think that would be a little bit genetic in some degree. And so now here I am. I am like well past the years where you think that you would go after that sort of thing. And I'm starting to write. Now, whether I ever share some of that writing, who knows? That's not really what it's about. And I have started a blog, so there will be some aspects of my writing that I will be sharing and make publicly. But the rest of my writing is just really for me. And then I thought the other day, am I a writer? No, I couldn't possibly identify as a writer. I couldn't say that I was a writer because I'm not making a living by writing. And then I thought about it and I thought, actually, I write every day. Every day I write. And I'm working on learning to become a better writer. So why wouldn't I say I was a writer? I mean, I'm a writer. So it's all of those moments and those thoughts, and maybe you're having them right now too at this age, as you explore things and you take on these new identities. I know somebody that started painting and they were afraid to call themselves a painter. But that's exactly what they were. They were a painter. It's not about what you get paid for. When it comes down to your self-identity, sure, if somebody said, what's your professional identity? I don't know. I think it might be questionable if I said I was a writer. But when it comes down to self-identity, that's up to you. And there isn't anybody who can tell you that that isn't you. So you get to do your own explorations, decide what your passion is, decide what you always wondered about, take some steps in that direction, and that becomes a part of your self-identity. If taking that little quiz type exercise appeals to you and you think you would like to see yourself how your values align with how you allot your time, I'll put that little exercise into a link in the description down below, and you can print that off. And or if you don't have a printer, then just look at what it's 2 pages. Look at how the pages are designed. You can just get a scrap piece of paper and you can do it yourself without printing. And you can test it out, and it is completely free. So don't be shy. Go ahead and check it out and do the exercise. I'd love to hear how it works for you. So if you do the exercise and you have some comments to share on that, please do so in the comments. So I'm going to spend the rest of this beautiful late September day outside, going for a very long walk and getting some sunshine. I see a lot of people out on the lake kayaking or in their boats. And so I'm on my way to go enjoy the day, and I hope you do too. And make sure that you like and you subscribe, because that's the only way they're going to promote my videos. And check out my playlist, because I have lots of other videos now starting to get published, and I'm going to keep going with that. This is Michelle at Soloing Canada, Musings from Midlife.